see it's gonna be a long night.
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're here to talk about 2021's Wrath of Man, and we're also here to talk about its brand new 4K Blu-ray that just came out from Shout Factory. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, nothing helps the channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Wrath of Man was originally released in 2021, and this one kind of flew under my radar. This film was directed by Guy Ritchie, who I'm a really big fan of. I love pretty much most of his films except for Rock and Rolla, and whatever that movie was he did with his wife Madonna at the time. Other than that, Guy Ritchie's pretty much worked for me as far as his style goes. I like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Snatch is probably my favorite of all his films, but even in 2020, just before the pandemic started, he released The Gentleman starring Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell, and I love that movie. I thought that movie was phenomenal, and I was surprised that more people weren't talking about that movie come the end of 2020, because that was just such a well-made, right in line with Snatch. You know, it's got that snappy dialogue. It's a fun story that's just unraveling a mystery, and that's pretty much what he does here with Wrath of Man, is he makes a mystery film, but takes away all that comedy. This is much more of a serious film. It's a revenge tale, and it stars Jason Statham, who's worked with Guy Ritchie plenty in the past, mainly in his first two films, and I'm not the biggest Jason Statham guy. I've never really been fully behind what his acting is, which is, you know, that angry looking but really strong European type, and that's exactly what he plays here. But Guy Ritchie usually knows how to use him best. Like, him in Snatch is awesome. Like, putting that little comedy twist on him.
Okay, you're lucky we aren't worm food after your last performance. Buying a mobile palace is a little rich.
On what his regular persona gives off, which is this angry guy, but you better not fuck with him because he'll absolutely destroy you. So in this movie, Jason Statham plays H, and he's nicknamed that by Bullet, played by Holt McCallany, who you might recognize from Mindhunter, which is actually one of my favorite, now I guess, canceled TV shows from Netflix. And it was cool to see him pop up in here. He basically plays Jason Statham's direct supervisor at this new job that he just got, which is, it's a cash truck business. They're basically the guys inside the cash truck. They guard these cash trucks, you know, all the money that's inside of it. And they want strong people, because at the very beginning of this film, we see one of these cash trucks getting robbed, and we only see it from one angle. Guy Ritchie keeps the camera still on this angle, and we only see them just robbing this truck from inside the truck. We hear, though, that 2 guards were killed and a civilian, and then we go right into the opening credits. And after the opening credits, we go into our film, and we see Jason Statham getting this job with the cash guarding company and learning the ways. You know, we get that classic cliche hazing that we see in all these types of movies, like, oh, it's the new guy, let's pick on him. But, you know, if you're familiar with Jason Statham, that's not going to end too well. You know, like, come on, even if he is just a new guy, look at him. Like, this guy is built like a tank. You know, he's not like that overly jacked, like Arnold type, but, you know, he's still got that angry look on his face. He's still pretty jacked. Why would you mess around with him? That should just be obvious right from the jump. Don't mess with Jason Statham. But this movie really is a mystery movie, and they don't really reveal too much to you at the very beginning. You honestly, from the very beginning, when they show that opening cash truck being robbed, I was not too sure what they were trying to show me. And as the movie unravels, we see that cash truck robbery from 4 different angles. And as we progress through the story and we see that cash truck robbery being robbed, it also helps us unravel the mystery of this story and of Jason Statham's character. Because very early in this movie, he's just a regular cash truck guard, and he's just trying to do his regular job. But Post Malone, who makes a cameo in this, him and his crew try to rob one of these cash trucks, but they messed around with the wrong guy, because Jason Statham gets out of that truck and he just starts to lay people out and just throws everybody off. Like, what the hell is this guy? And from there, because I don't want to spoil this movie, because I went in this completely blind other than the synopsis that was on Wikipedia, so I didn't know anything about this movie, so I'm not going to spoil anything after that part of the movie, because we start to learn a lot more about Jason Statham's character through the rest of the first act and through the entire second act. Now, once we reveal what his character's motivations are and what our antagonist's motivations are of the story by the time we get to the third act, that's when this movie really just starts to fall apart for me, because I was so into the first 2 acts of this movie. I thought that they unraveled this mystery perfect. They really showed us this cash truck robbery from every single different angle and really revealed to us what was in plain sight the entire time, and I thought it was very clever, and the acting throughout was great. Besides just Jason Statham, you also get Scott Eastwood in this, which is awesome. I love seeing Scott Eastwood pop up, and he does a great job in this movie, even if his character, just like every character in this movie, is just a movie cliche and is a character that you've seen before, because the antagonists of this movie, their motivations start out great, but again, as we get into that third act and when we start to spend more time with our antagonists of the story, it's like, okay, your motivations, I follow followed you, then you just went too far. You went right into that movie cliche where it's like, you're bad just to be bad. And that always doesn't work for me. The best villains always have motivations that make sense to the viewer, and they started out that way, but then it just starts to unravel from there. And again, in the third act, you know, this is Jason Statham's movie, and he is the driving force of this. Actually, as far as Jason Statham goes, like I'm not the biggest fan of his, but he is perfectly cast in this movie, and he does a phenomenal job. This is probably one of my top 2 favorite Jason Statham performances. And in the third act, he's not in it that much. Once the story unravels to what it does, you know what the ending is going to be, and you just want them to stick that landing, but for some reason this movie just falls apart in the third act, and we spend way too much time with our antagonist, and the movie itself just doesn't work for me from that point on. And you know, it ends exactly how I thought it was going to end, and the ending was satisfying, but you know, that third act is it's rough, and it's really disappointing. It honestly reminded me, if you're a fan of WCW, remember the Sting storyline when we first get that Crow storyline when the NWO started in 1996 and we were building to Starrcade 1997. Sting hadn't wrestled and we were just building this up perfectly, and we wanted to know this whole mystery of Sting, and we wanted to see him conquer Hulk Hogan, and then we get to Starrcade 97 and he does that. He beats Hulk Hogan, but it was just so unsatisfying and so underwhelming, and that's exactly how this movie felt to me, because I was so into this movie for the first 2 acts. I was like, how did this movie slip by me? This movie was phenomenal. I'm like, I don't understand how this got by me back last year, because I was going to the movies in April of 2021. I should have checked this out, and it somehow got by me. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, okay, I see what happened here. This movie started great, it just could not stick the landing, because overall it is a really good movie. I would say that it's still worth your time. It's definitely worth checking out, because I was never bored throughout the whole movie. I just kind of ended this film disappointed. What could have been a 4.5, 5-star, 8, 9 out of 10 film ends up unraveling into a 7 out of 10 film. Still a good movie. I still had a lot of fun watching it. The action sequences were phenomenal. It's very well acted from everybody. Jason Statham, like I said, he gets a couple cheesy one-liners in here, but they do still really work in the overall plot of the movie. Guy Ritchie does a great job directing, as he always does. You know, he has that certain kind of style. He is an auteur himself, so you know you're watching a Guy Ritchie movie, and this is no different. I just wanted more from this movie. I just really wish that the third act would have lived up to what the first 2 acts were setting up, and I really wish I didn't walk out of this film disappointed like I did, because it really was a great movie right up until that point. So overall, it's still a good film. I can definitely recommend you checking this one out if you haven't seen it yet. And if you do want to check it out, why don't we talk about that Shout Factory 4K Blu-ray that just came out. So Shout Factory just put out Wrath of Man on 4K Blu-ray, and the original Blu-ray was released by Warner Brothers back in 2021 when this film came out with no 4K release. I'm not a big fan when studios do things like this. It usually hurts the consumer. If you bought this Blu-ray back in 2021 and now you're like, oh man, why didn't the 4K just come out in 2021 when I could have bought it then, because now I have to double dip. Now this is a little bit of a different scenario, because Warner Brothers put out that original Blu-ray and now Shout Factory is putting out the 4K. And now this does include the Blu-ray in it, so you do get that Blu-ray and you get the 4K Blu-ray, but it's not the exact same disc as that Blu-ray in 2021, because this does feature a brand new Dolby Atmos track on the 4K Blu-ray and on the regular Blu-ray, whereas the previous Blu-ray only had a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1, which is also available on the 4K and the Blu-ray if you want to check those out instead of the Dolby Atmos track. And before I dive into my review of the audio and the visuals, let's check out the packaging. Now, this is a standard Shout Factory release. This is not a collector's edition, so there is no reversible slipcover. It's kind of bare bones, but it's $27.99 as of this recording. And, you know, like previous releases where they just put the 4K in, like I said, they did package in the Blu-ray. So on the inside here, you get your Blu-ray disc and your 4K Blu-ray disc with their individual artwork, which I always do appreciate when they have artwork on the discs. The cover is the same cover as the previous Blu-ray, which that poster works for me. I really do enjoy it. I think it's pretty cool. And, you know, Jason Statham just looks like a badass. And that's really it. No reversible cover art, and you also get no slipcover on this. So you're just getting a bare bones packaging. The only thing that kind of stands out is the individual disc design on the Blu-ray and the 4K, and the fact you get the Blu-ray and the 4K in here, which is good, because I know people are pretty disappointed when these companies don't package in the Blu-ray in there, because, you know, it's kind of like you're still charging the same amount as if you were putting the Blu-ray and the 4K in here, but you don't. So it doesn't make sense. That's just the company's trying to save some money, but in here you do get that. And the extras that are all going to be on your Blu-ray disc And that's just the trailer for the movie. There are absolutely no extras. Other than that, there is not a documentary, there's not an interview, there's not a commentary track. It's absolutely 100% bare bones extras. I don't even know why they bothered putting the trailer on here other than to promote it on the back of the box, because it's 2023 now and you're watching this on YouTube. You can watch the trailer easily on YouTube. You don't need to watch on the disc. I don't know how many people actually go back and watch the trailers on here, unless they're for other films that are kind of related to it or released from the studio. But I'm not going to watch the trailer for this movie on the Blu-ray disc itself before I go pop in the 4K. So that's just a way to make the consumer believe that there is more on this disc than there really is. So really what's selling this disc itself is that 4K upgrade from the previous Blu-ray. And I watched this and man, what a phenomenal 4K visually, and audio-wise too. But first let's start with the visuals. The visuals were stunning. And if you compare this to the Blu-ray, all the blacks look pretty gray. And like, a dark gray, and you kind of, you can see the material on everything, like this early scene where he's running on a treadmill and he's got this black suit on, and his direct supervisor also has a black suit on, and it looks gray. It looks like you can see all the detail on it, but then when you put that 4K in and that HDR, because there is no Dolby Vision, and that HDR kicks in and the blacks just go completely deep and dark, and it's pure black, and it looks amazing because this film, a lot of it does take place in the dark. It has a very unique cinematography style where everything kind of has this like orange glow or orange tint to it. You kind of notice this in The Gentleman too from Guy Ritchie. It's very unique looking. Like there's a lot of scenes in the dark where like there's just characters talking in the dark, and that's where HDR does amazing work, because you only see what you're supposed to see, exactly what the cinematographer wanted you to see. You only see the characters lit, and that's it. You don't see that dark gray background where it kind of starts to look like oily in the back, and you don't see that here. It's just completely the characters and what you were supposed to see. On the Blu-ray, it can't handle that as much, and that's where 4K and HDR really do amazing work, and why it's worth upgrading to 4K. And another thing that was very noticeable from the Blu-ray to the 4K was the brightness. Even in the menus, like it was just so much brighter on the 4K than it is to the Blu-ray. And you wouldn't think that would make that much of a difference, but it really does, because the contrast on top of the brightness, they just come together and it works perfectly. This is one of the most visually stunning 4Ks that I can honestly say I've ever seen. Now again, a 2021 film shot on the best cameras at the time with an art tour like Guy Ritchie, it's going to look great. And then just having that 4K and the HDR enhance it and make it look better than it possibly could, because I really think it's a pretty big gap between the 4K and the Blu-ray. And you're only getting the Blu-ray in here as a packet, but if you had that previous Blu-ray and you really like this movie because it is a good movie, and you think, oh man, I don't know if it's worth upgrading from the Blu-ray to the 4K, I can honestly say it's a pretty big jump visually from the Blu-ray to the 4K. That surprised me. I didn't expect that, because it's still the same movie, still shot at the same time, and it's just a compressed scan from what I understand. And I don't know, it's crazy that this 4K looked as good as it did. I really can't sell the visuals short on this. I thought the visuals were absolutely stunning. And then the audio, you get a Dolby Atmos track on here, and it is a really good Dolby Atmos track. There's a lot of action scenes in this movie, and they have the bass pumping at these action scenes. It works great. What an awesome Dolby Atmos track. If the visuals weren't stunning and the Atmos track was still this Atmos track, I still could have probably recommended it, because that is a phenomenal Dolby Atmos track on here. And if you're not into Dolby Atmos track, there's also a DTS HD 5.1 on here that you can check out. But that Atmos track really does some great work, makes great use of your ears. The mix itself is perfect. The dialogue is never too low compared to the action scenes. Like, sometimes when you hit an action scene, all the shooting and explosions could overwhelm the dialogue, and then you can't understand the dialogue, and you're turning it up, and now you're deaf because the guns are firing behind you, and you're just trying to understand what someone's saying. But you don't have that issue here at all. Everything is mixed perfectly. They did a great job on this sound mix. Everything is perfectly balanced. You never have to turn the volume up. You never have to turn it lower. You can just set your remote down, and you're fine throughout the entire thing. And it makes great use of all your speakers. If you have a proper Atmos setup, this is definitely something you can show your friends, and you're going to want to show off your entire system. This is almost reference quality, which is really impressive. I really didn't expect it to be this good. I don't know why. Guy Ritchie usually does make some really good looking films that would translate well to the 4K format. Like The Gentleman did come to 4K. Snatch is also a great 4K, but that has a different artistic style. That's still early Guy Ritchie, so it kind of feels different than the rest of his films as far as visuals go, but Snatch is still still probably my favorite of all his movies, and that 4K is also really good. So if you don't have that, I can recommend Snatch on 4K as well. But overall, what's going to sell you on this is going to be the visuals and audio. But at $27.99 with no extras at all, it's really hard to recommend this film at that price, because I think if this had been priced at about $22.99, or maybe it goes on sale for that price, I think I can recommend it, because just the lack of any extras is really hard, and the fact that the packaging is bare bones, it's really hard to recommend it at that $27.99 price point. But that disc itself, that 4K disc with that Dolby Atmos and that HDR and the film, I can honestly say it's definitely worth it, because I still am very happy with my purchase, and I'm glad I picked this up because I really did enjoy the film. You know, it didn't stick the landing for me, but it's still really good. I still had a good time watching it. So if I was going to rate this overall at a score of 1 to 10, based on the visuals, the audio, the packaging, the film itself, I'm still going to give this a really solid 7.5 out of 10. You know, the lack of extras and the lack of a slip cover and reversible cover art, I have to take a little bit of points off for that. And just factoring in the film itself, you know, it's still an amazing showpiece of a disc, but the price is just a little too high at $27.99 when you're really only getting the film and no extras. So that's always a little bit disappointing, and I'm always, from my personal standpoint, going to take a little bit of points off for that, because for a one-time watch, it's not worth it at that price. But if you're going to be revisiting this over and over, I would say definitely wait till it goes on sale, because at some point it should drop in price. You know, Shout Factory doesn't have that many sales, but when they do, this should be included in that. And at $21, $22, I think that's the perfect spot for this type of movie. And like I said, it's a fun watch, but don't go into it expecting it to be anything more than what it is trying to be. And that's just a fun revenge tale that I think you're going to enjoy. But if you guys enjoyed this video, nothing helps out the channel more than by you liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and then going out and telling all your friends.